Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. If you're in the home services space, then how are you acquiring new customers? It's likely a variety of tactics like search, display, and social, but what about an exchange with affiliates and partners as well? Depending on whatever channel, the lead quality may be of a different flavor than your sales team expected, and it's important to remember that all leads, or any lead in any vertical, is never created equal. Catherine Sutterlin is the Director of Client Success, Home Services for PX, and she's a subject matter expert in customer acquisition for home services. And on this episode, we'll discuss lead generation strategies, customer acquisition platforms and marketplaces, affiliate marketing, and the home services vertical. So let's tune in to a home services expert with a household shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Kat, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. Please tell us a little bit about your background and your journey thus far in your career.
Hi there. This is Catherine Sutterlin. And just a little bit about myself. I've been in the space for about 7 years now, really starting off my journey focused on EDU and managing, those clients. And more recently, I would say over the past 2.5, 3 years, really shifting focus to home services and now really heading up that vertical here at PX.
So you decided to move from EDU to home services after being at an agency in Manhattan because of the large homes that exist, those palatial 600 square foot apartments in Manhattan. What
Yep.
what made your focus shift?
I would say for me, really focused on my own personal career growth. I really wanted to expand my horizons a bit
Yeah,
and focus on something different. And I would say, specifically with EDU and the type of affiliate marketing that I was involved with previously, there were less opportunities for me to grow just based on, some of the compliancy issues that started to become more and more real in that space specifically. So at that time, it seemed like a good time to kind of shift gears and really focus in on something new where I could sink my teeth in and really build, a team from the ground up.
sure. Then describe, if you will, a little bit about the broad depth of the home services industry and all of the types of verticals that you work with today inside that industry.
Sure. So I would say the home services umbrella is quite broad. And specifically, in my day to day and the clients and partners that I manage and speak with, we're primarily focused on home security, solar, home improvement, and then more specifically, breaking down that home improvement into 4 or 5 main categories on the lead side. So that, is primarily focused on windows, roofing, HVAC, flooring. Um, so those are kind of the main that we're focused in on. And then outside of that, we do have some focus and product availability, within some of the other core areas, interior renovation, pest control, all of those all of those things that run the gamut.
So, from a 30,000 foot view of your home, where do you see lead generation, I don't know, sort of maturing, if you will, or progressing in that home services space today? What are some of the tactics that you see that are really working well? What are some of the ones maybe that are dated that are not?
So I would say, as the core of what we're doing is really generating customers for the partners that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few ways that we do that and a few ways that we really focus in on that. In terms of traffic type that we primarily focus on, it's really focused on high intent traffic. So, the search traffic, email, display, and it's really about digging in on the messaging, I would say, specifically on the front end to ensure that the customer intent is there.
So, in home services, I know it's really important to target the right audiences because you're looking at homeowners who maybe own a condo or an apartment in Manhattan, but they don't have a big enough space for fencing, or maybe they don't have to deal with roofing. So, talk about those kind of things that you run into and look at to build your target audience of a homeowner.
Sure. So I would say there are definitely ways in which you want to pre-qualify consumers prior to, matching them with a company or brand on the back end or selling that
Hmm.
data to a company or brand on the back end. Because really, I would say from my perspective, the main objective is to find the right customer and provide value for the partners that we're working with. We use a lot of tools, and I would say, depending on what the specific product is, but looking at, your traditional lead generation off of an online form, typically what we're doing is we are really vetting out with qualifying questions based on the vertical, um, how we're going to ultimately determine whether or not that particular customer or consumer is going to be qualified for the program or offering that we have available on the back end. So, as you look at different types of home improvement, I would say there's a lot more value for, um, a consumer who is looking for solar panels if they have, above a certain threshold in terms of their monthly electricity bill. There also might be, certain utility providers that, will not qualify for certain programs. So I think it's important to kind of understand what those criteria are per vertical and kind of bake that into your front end filters so that you're automating this qualifying process prior to, matching that lead with, a potential back end um, brand or company that may not be able to help them with what they're looking for.
Sure.
So, I would say that's a big part of what we do, and we also try to apply some of those front end filters in terms of, zip targeting as well. Um, so there's a lot of levers I would say that we can pull to try to come out of the gate with success, or at least providing a pre-qualifier.
Well, I know you're working also with a lot of large, well-known brands in the space, but are you also working with? I'm assuming a lot of local mom and pops as well that maybe need additional support. Like, and the reason why I'm asking that is, are you also looking at providing content? Have you seen that, sort of filter into your own play from an agency standpoint, trying to help bring in customers for people who maybe can't write out content pieces on their own, or maybe some of those best practices you even would bring from a content standpoint?
Yeah, so I would say the size of the companies that we're working with definitely varies.
Sure.
So we are absolutely working with a lot of, larger direct companies who have a well-oiled machine and know exactly how to, handle these consumers and get them on the phone and sell them. But then there are a lot of smaller or, local or regional companies who are looking to really increase their customer base. So I think in those cases, we take a little bit more of a consultative role where, we kind of coach them on, different methods of follow up to yield the best results. If they're outbound dialing on a lead, what the cadence should be, or what is an outbound strategy that we've found to work well. And in terms of content, yes, we have tested a lot of different creative, internally and with some of the publishers and partners that we work with. So, we're always kind of looking at that to see, where we're getting the best front end results, but also more importantly, in collecting some of that disposition data and feedback from our clients, what is actually backing out and really tying that back to, a specific placement and source and traffic type that, performs well.
Which vertical in the home services space is really killing it from a sophistication of marketing standpoint? Is it solar panel? Is it, blinds? Is it, because each of them have different kinds of tools, like you were talking about, different kinds of targeting. There's so many different aspects of a home, but which one of the verticals inside the home services space do you see really being the most sophisticated group of marketing experts within those larger brands that are going to have
Right.
larger, sophisticated teams?
So I would say home security is up there,
Yeah.
and I know that's not one that you mentioned.
No,
Um,
that's a good one.
but typically those lead buyers have a lot of data and a lot of findings that allow them to to really, strategize and tighten up their outbound dialing, their cadence in which they're dialing out, some of their follow-up processes. So whether it be, just a traditional phone call or whether they're kind of incorporating in some, remarketing techniques and tactics like email or texting. So I think, those guys are pretty savvy when it comes to the technology standpoint of being efficient and
Yeah.
handling those leads. Um, but I would say there are, large buyers across all of the verticals that seem to really have found their secret sauce on what is really working and how they can maximize on these leads ultimately that we're sending through.
Well, that's a very challenging space. I mean, ADP was acquired within the last few
Yeah.
years. I mean, that there's it's a strong market. So when you look at you know solar versus home security versus pest control versus HVAC or any other variations of the home services coin, what are some of the similarities and also some of the differences in lead gen by those different verticals? Not one by one, but are there commonalities that are really standing out that make things super easy to attract a new customer and super difficult in lead gen as well?
Sure. So I would say there are a lot of commonalities and overarching themes that are going to overlap between a lot of the home services verticals. So, in terms of targeting, I would say for a lot of these products, you know, we are targeting some new homeowners. So that is definitely something that we see is kind of across the board where, a person who is moving into a new home may be looking to get a security system, maybe looking to make some renovations to their home. And then I would say outside of that, there are a lot of similarities in terms of qualifiers, that we would implement across the board. So, we are looking to target homeowners. We are looking to target consumers that have a certain credit rating in order for them to qualify. So, there's a lot of things that are overlapping that allow us to kind of roll over certain strategies into different verticals or take learnings from one vertical to another and kind of utilize those.
Then what are the challenges that you see as well in that same space?
So I would say, not so much as a challenge, but I think for me and what I really look at is trying to dig in specifically to, the different customers' business and how, what value we can really add um, with our program. So, it's really determining what metric are they looking at to determine the health of a program like ours. So I think that's the biggest thing is really figuring out, what that benchmark is in terms of cost per acquisition, whether that be, an appointment set rate, whether that be, your cost per sale or your cost per install, depending on, what that product is. I think it's making those determinations early on, and really then tailoring your program around that. So I think that's, really part of what as an organization, we've really tried to do is kind of solve some of these pain points that we see all the time. So where are my leads coming from? How can I optimize? How can I improve? How can I compete? Especially in a shared lead model, if that happens to be, the model that you're operating in, or how do I deal with so many sources? So I think that's really where, we come in to really become this transparent source of leads where we can open things up and really focus in on a more performance-based program. Ultimately, pricing out leads at the appropriate price so that they back
Mm-hmm.
out into the effective, CPA target that we have set for the campaign to make sure that it's successful. Being transparent on exactly how and where we're generating these leads so that, we can really allow agents to be, you know, in the know of what the user flow looks like to help shape their conversations with these consumers and understand really what it is that they're looking for.
Are you leveraging a lot of partnerships, and the one in particular that I'm thinking of in general for some of these places, as well as also realtors? Realtors, can be an amazing source
Mm-hmm.
of opening the door, if you will, to different companies to provide leads for whether or not somebody needs blinds or HVAC or solar or anything like that. Have you seen that partnerships, at least, not necessarily realtors, but if partnerships in general in that form or fashion been much of an add-on for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say across all of the verticals that we're active in, we're always focused on developing and forging partnerships with different companies who we may be able to integrate with our platform. If it makes sense for us, we're certainly open and looking for that all the time in terms of bringing on sources, to send leads through PX is really, the goal, and the way we operate is through this open exchange. We work with, hundreds of different publishers and partners to really help, with the lead generation efforts.
Dive in a little bit deeper, if you would, and talk about what your technology does that helps drive a lot of traffic for affiliates and advertisers, and what that PX exchange is all about.
So I would say really the way that we integrate with different partners, and publishers is really through our platform. So it's a customer acquisition platform. Really, that's unique because of the way it delivers, a very clear and transparent view into where every lead comes from. So all of our
Mm-hmm.
buyers have access to hundreds of trusted sources that we've, gone ahead with our team and vetted and really worked very closely with on strategy and traffic type to place within the platform and plug into the applicable verticals in one single marketplace. So really, within PX, there's access to, many different trusted sources where, we kind of open it up and really provide full transparency into what type of traffic you're getting. And further than that, what we've started to do now and really focus in on is getting a little bit more granular in terms of how the leads are converting, broken out by traffic type, broken out by source ID, and really kind of look at the sales funnel based off of this disposition data and lead status data that we're getting back from our partners. So we can really ingest that into our platform and view the information in a much better way that allows us to make better decisions strategically on, how we want to prioritize or block certain sources, or how we want to right price leads based off of conversion. So we can actually
Mm-hmm.
see, broken down by all of those attributes that I mentioned, how many leads were generated per source of that segment of leads, how many of those were contacted, and from there, how many of those converted to an appointment set, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, what are we looking at in terms of the end goal based off of the CPA that we have as a benchmark on the specific campaign level.
So, if you're looking at lead gen as a whole for all of your home services clients, what typically has been the most productive channel for you outside of Google, which is a great channel for from paid search, but it does plateau for a lot of people. But other than that, outside of the main ones, where are you seeing things really do well for you across any of the different verticals?
So I would say outside of, your traditional search, we've seen pretty good success across the board. Primarily, I would say, within social media, specifically Facebook, where we're able to get really granular on targeting and setting up lookalike audiences and working with our partners to, pass back that feedback and kind of build, based off of that. And then also, we're pretty focused in on email, as well as some display native. Um, and I would say, really the biggest thing for us is determining how the leads are converting by traffic type and source. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's really what we're stressing is, no lead is created equal, and there are going to be certain types of traffic that, if you have the appetite to take some of the, traditionally lower intent traffic at a lower price, it may be just as beneficial as long as it's backing out into your effective, cost per acquisition goal. So,
Agreed.
as long as, and for me, I say, it's always important to kind of understand what that business model looks like and what the capacity is for the partners that we work with. Because, if it's a volume play and you'd like to take and work those leads at a lower price, it might, make sense for your model to kind of feed those in. But I think part of, the strategy is being transparent on exactly what type of traffic is getting sent through and how it's converting.
So a lot of the aggregators, I mean, Home Advisor Purchase Angie's List, there are a ton of aggregators out there that really do this. But have you seen that be a help or a hindrance to a lot of the marketing efforts that you work on in the home services space?
I see it as very different. So, I don't think it would be a hindrance, and I don't see, that as a direct competitor of kind of what we're doing.
Sure.
I really think what we're doing is really creating this open exchange where, we're providing access to hundreds of trusted sources that can be purchased
Exactly.
through the platform. So it's just more of a kind of a bidding platform, if you will, where, we're really focused in on opening up the transparency. So I think it's a little bit of a different model, in how we would expect, the customers and companies that we work with to interact with the platform,
Sure.
and being really strategic, and being able to optimize much more easily and right price leads based off of what they're worth.
Sure. Well, so here's another question about the space. Have you noticed within the last few years a big shift by a lot of the different verticals in marketing too? Sort of you mentioned earlier those new homeowners, and I say more of the millennials who are moving into those new homes. You could call it new homeowners, you could call it millennial, but are you seeing that as much of a presence in the home services space right now with a lot of your clients?
I would say not necessarily. I think there are um, certain sub verticals maybe that
Sure.
we would see a little bit of a shift just in terms of targeting, and pretty much what we've done or asked for in the past is just visibility into what the target customer looks like based off of historical data, and we kind of use that to really develop our plan, and how we're going to start targeting
Mm-hmm.
based off of that. So, I would say yes, generally, in certain areas specifically, there are certain trends that we are aware of, but we bake that into what we're doing
Sure.
in our targeting.
They still want old people with money that are going to yell at kids to get out of their yard. So,
Well, I would also say, taking into account, really credit is a huge part of qualifying and allowing certain customers to even be eligible for certain products or services.
that's
So,
true.
so keeping that in mind, that um, certainly adds to what we're focused on.
So I had the pleasure of hearing you speak a couple of times at large marketing conferences. I'm curious as to what you've gotten out of speaking at those events, what that's done for you personally, and also what that's done for you professionally.
So, quite proud that I survived, first and
Yeah.
foremost. I do get a little stage fright, but I would say, from a personal perspective, I think it's definitely been a goal of mine to kind of be able to develop some content that could be useful, for other marketers in the space, just based off of some of the experiences that I've had. So really just sharing that knowledge, and then, from a professional standpoint, really being able to and having the ability to kind of network with those those other individuals who are operating, in a similar vertical, where it might be hard at those shows maybe to kind of find the right people, to talk to really, figure out if there are synergies between companies, and really what, can be done to build relationships and work together.
Kat, would you say this is probably your favorite podcast you've ever been on as a result of meeting somebody and networking at a
Yes.
marketing conference.
Yes.
That's the niche I'm going for. It's right there. So, Kat, we've come to that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I don't know. Let's hope.
So, it's because your name is Kat, but Batgirl or Catwoman?
Ooh. I'm going to say Catwoman, and that's because my name is Cat.
That would work. Cost per lead or cost per acquisition?
That's an interesting one, and I know I don't have too much time to answer this.
It's a
But
4-hour show.
but I would say cost per lead, but operating with
Ooh.
a variable lead price. So having the flexibility to price based off of different attributes. So we have a fixed price and we know what that is, but we're able to adjust that based off of different attributes, whether it be vertical specific attributes. If we know a job with 3+ windows is going to have a higher value, we may price those leads a little bit higher. And conversely, managing it the opposite way too. And same goes for traffic type. So if we know that there's, this search traffic that historically converts at a really high level, we may, increase the lead price for that as long as it's backing out effectively, like I said, to the CPA goals. And really what that allows us to do, I would say, is ensure that we are able to drive and source some of the higher converting traffic. And, we need to be competitive, with pricing sometimes to do that. And then really offsetting, if there's other, mid-tier traffic that may not convert as well, but is still valuable to pass through, we can price that accordingly as well. So it's
So
kind of a hybrid is what I'll say.
so I was about to end the show abruptly, but that was a very well thought out and nice save
Thank you.
because I would have gone with CPA. But Himalayan or Persian? I'm going
Yeah.
to transition to that. Himalayan or Persian?
Ooh, Persian.
So we spoke about, millennials and new homeowners. Tiny house hunters on HGTV or beachfront bargain hunt?
Ooh, I'm going beachfront.
Thank you. Good answer. And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Ooh, that's like Sophie's choice. Biscuits or
Thank you. Finally, somebody gets it.
both. Can we choose both?
No, you have to pick one.
Ooh, I'm going to go biscuits.
Unless you go to Cracker Barrel where you're allowed to take both. But there's not a lot, as I've told many people, there's not a lot of Cracker Barrels in Manhattan. So, Kat, where can people find out more about you, follow your thoughts, and learn more about your thought leadership in the home services space? And
Sure.
tell
So,
us where.
yeah, company website is www.px.com. And you can also find me, Catherine Sutterlin, on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Kat, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today.
Yep. Thanks, Kenneth.
So there was my conversation with Catherine Sutterlin, the Director of Client Success Home Services for PX and a subject matter expert in customer acquisition for home services. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with her. First, when you look at the home services industry, quite often you'll see traffic qualified mostly at the persona level, and unfortunately, that doesn't always pan out. Kat reminds us that in home services, you should go extra steps in pre-qualifying your audience with additional qualifying questions. Then you automate the qualifying process well before matching to a lead, to a back-end brand or company. And a side note on targeting millennials, remember that millennial is still basically just an age group. It's the popular target right now, but even when you look at home services, think of how tight the credit market has been for all age groups, let alone the ones who can afford homes and don't DIY. Don't just assume that because someone is a certain age range making X income, that they necessarily want to buy your product or service. Use many more points of data. Second, No lead is created equal. Whether the lead comes from social media, email, display, or wherever, it ultimately comes down to determining how that lead converts and whether you have the appetite for certain types of leads. Your sales data should be a significant decision driver. And as she said, for me, it's always important to kind of understand what that business model looks like and what the capacity is for the partners that we work with, because if it's a volume play and you like to take and work those leads at a lower price, it might make sense for your model to kind of feed those in. But I think that part of the strategy is being transparent on exactly what type of traffic is getting sent through and how it's converting. Great point. Third, you've heard me mention conferences on many episodes, and I met today's guest a few years ago at a conference. She has a refreshing take on why she likes to speak, in that she wanted to develop some content that could be useful for other marketers in the space just based off some of her own experiences. So really it's just sharing that knowledge. Agreed. And look, we're all doing this to try to help move the knowledge forward. And if you're in the home services space, there are plenty of different conferences where you can network with others who are operating in that or similar verticals. Many times you'll get more out of the networking meetings than anything else. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. And as Sigmund Freud said, time spent with cats and sharks is never wasted. Okay, so I threw in the part about sharks, but you know why. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.